Hello everyone, this is your corporate girl, time with your recruiter. Today we are going to discuss what makes a good candidate versus the bad. Today we have a guest, colleague, Charles Leslie Odame. He holds an MBA in Human Resource Management, a BA in Political Science and Sociology, and a certified Human Resource Practitioner with 15 years working experience in Human Resource Management. Leslie is currently working with one of the leading banks in West Africa and has interviewed over 300 candidates. Today, he's going to share with us some few candidate characteristics, what makes a good candidate versus the bad. A good candidate is totally subjective. We can't possibly describe a perfect candidate that everyone will like because every resume has a criteria of who makes a great candidate. However, I think it is safe to say that there are few characteristics that makes a candidate good.
Yes.
So Leslie, what do you think makes a good candidate?
Like you rightly said, describing a good candidate can be very subjective, but there are generally a few traits a candidate will possess that would make him good. So we can agree that no matter the position, the good candidate is qualified, right? So you look back at their experiences and they must have relevant experience from their past employment to bring on board. There's nothing worse than interviewing a candidate who has zero to no experience about the vacant role that is being advertised for. And that can be so frustrating. It's great to see a candidate who comes in with a track record of success. And usually you could see that from their resume. And it gives you an indication that such a candidate is forward thinking and will be able to contribute to the organization. So a candidate who comes to an interview with concrete ideas about the job and what is expected of him is a good one. Because for me, he knows what the job requires, what the role is, and how he intends to contribute. Such a candidate is a good candidate and would do very well when given the opportunity. So another good characteristic of a good candidate is his ability to know what the organization does, their values, who they are, because once you know these things, you can identify with the organization and then you can hit the ground running. Immediately you are hired. That is if you are given the opportunity. So what we are saying here is that we're not necessarily saying you should memorize everything, but we are asking that at least you should have some basic information about the organization that you're going to be interviewed for. That in itself speaks well about the candidate. And for such candidates, they fit into the organization perfectly and they are able to settle in and hit the ground running. In effect, if the candidate shows that he has taken the time to research and to dive into the organization, it definitely tells me that that person might just be a good fit for the organization.
I believe that candidates shouldn't just be knowledgeable about the hard facts, even though they should.
So another characteristic of a good candidate is honesty. I mean, what's not to love about an honest candidate? Such a person is able to level with you and speak to issues in an honest manner. They are able to tell you important things, and you can really tell from the conversation that this person is being very honest. And such a candidate will be a good fit for any organization they find themselves in. It's quite easy to identify a candidate who has either lied on his application, his CV or resume, or any information that has been sent prior to an interview. Such candidates are a no-no for me. And it's very obvious that you cannot bring such people into your organization. So recruiters usually talk about the perfect candidate. But the truth of the matter is, all candidates have flaws. They may have one flaw from the other. The point is to identify self-awareness, which is an interpersonal skill that every good candidate possesses. And this is a skill that is required for good candidates. Another characteristic we can talk about for good candidates is they are communicative. For every successful organization, communication is key. And for a good candidate to succeed, or for someone to be considered as a good candidate, they must have good communication skills, either in their speech or how they present themselves, how they write, or how they put forward their thoughts. This is very key to a success of every organization.
So yes, Leslie, I agree with you. You know, one of the most time-consuming parts of being a recruiter is coordination.
Another characteristic of a good candidate for me is motivation. They are self-motivated and they show so much enthusiasm. They come into the interview room and they are beaming with so much energy that you are in a rush to want to talk to them. Such people may not necessarily tick all the boxes, or they may tick some of your boxes, but the mere fact that they have so much energy would add a lot to the organization. Motivated candidates will always surprise you as they become employees. It's not about what they say, it's about how they say it. And for such candidates, the mere passion that they show and the mere energy that they beam with would bring lots to the organization. And if you are able to identify such traits in the candidate, it's most certainly a good candidate.
Yes, I love to hear candidates take pride in their previous work and what they could do in the new role. That kind of enthusiasm shows that the candidate is really interested in their field and not just the way of paying their bill.
Certainly. So in another view, I think a candidate can be considered a good candidate when the interview flows perfectly. Perfectly in the sense that it is a conversation, it's a chat, it's something that you do give and take, not a one-sided discussion. I've been in interviews where you are actually begging to just end the interview because the interview is one-sided. You ask a question, you get an answer. You don't get any discourse between yourself and the candidate. And so for a good candidate, you realize that they engage you even during the conversation, and it becomes a wonderful time. And you actually don't want to end such interviews.
Yes, so if you're looking forward to work with a person before you even hire them, I think this is a great sign that they are good candidates or they are good for the role.
Certainly.
So Leslie, enough of the good candidates. What do you think are the characteristics that makes a bad candidate?
Not my favorite topic, but we'll give it a go. It's quite easy to identify the bad candidates. Everyone has an opinion on who the bad candidates are, but let's just take a look at some of these traits, and if they are the traits in some of the candidates you have come by, then certainly they are the bad candidates. Number one is they speak ill or they speak poorly about their current or their past employer. The number one red flag for me is a candidate who badmouths his previous employer. It's okay to talk about some negative experiences, but to constantly spend the entire period speaking ill about your employer is a major no for me. And that doesn't speak well of a candidate. It's definitely not an attractive feature of a good candidate. And so for me, any candidate who begins to badmouth his current employer is not a good fit. And for such a candidate, he or she must realize that you are sitting before a potential employer. And so you should beware of that.
Certainly.
Another point is they are unprofessional. So such a candidate will come in all over the place. He may have his tie not in the right position, his buttons are unbuttoned, his documents are all over the place. He doesn't speak well. He speaks when a question hasn't been asked, and he keeps quiet when a question has been asked. He doesn't answer the question professionally or as to somebody who knows what he's about. Such a person is a no-no for me. So bad candidates are always late. And this goes hand in hand with being unprofessional. I think that to be late is not really a bad thing, especially if the candidate has called in to give reasons why they will be late. But to show up late and not give any explanation for that, I think is a major red flag that recruiters need to be aware of. And for me, right from the on, if a candidate shows up late, the probability that it would continue is high. And so you should take note of that. One more thing that can also be discussed here is they come in unprepared. Such candidates will come in, their documentation is not in the right order, they have done zero research about the organization, and they barely can answer any question. You ask them a question and it kind of jolts them, it puts them off immediately, it destabilizes them. And that's a trait that recruiters must look out for, especially if you want to get a good candidate for a role that you have vacant. One final thing I'd like to say is bad candidates are usually underqualified. Now, I am not saying that do not hire underqualified candidates because they may be good for entry-level roles, but for experienced hires, it is always important to bring in very qualified personnel for such roles.
Wow, certainly, I agree with you. Thank you so much, Leslie. This has been very insightful. We hope to have you here some other time.
Thank you too for the opportunity given. I'm grateful and I hope to be here soon.
We've come to the end of today's session. I'd like to see your feedback in the comment section. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and see you in my next video.